I've been married twice. I'll get to the first marriage in a second. Great guy, wrong guy. But plactas were at my wedding because I was going to demand that he see me as a human being and not as a distraction. And he and his wife actually became friends. That's what you do when you have opposition. You try to connect with people. I also graduated with my master's degree and won the university's highest award for graduate prize for writing a thesis, which it was called Title Goes Here, which was always kind of my placeholder until I finished writing. It was a creative nonfiction autobiographical piece that also included a complete detailing of what had happened at Central Michigan and how I was treated. So to have the university then come back and say, this is the best there is, congratulations, meant so much. Quick story about how I got to Louisville. I fell in love, wonderful man. He actually lives in Louisville. He was working at the University of Louisville, which is why I am a Cards fan despite being married into a Kentucky family. But I loved them because the Cards embraced me. But all of a sudden, I was Mrs. So-and-so. I had been previously teaching full-time 100 students as an adjunct professor, preparing to earn my doctorate because I was going to be a college professor. And then love happened and life happened and I ended up here. So quickly how my career transpired to now, I, for about a year, just learned Leo and Terry Miners. That's who I credit with learning the city. I tuned in, first of all, when we were driving across the bridge, got the 4 dogs in the car. My husband, then Gary, had already bought a house, and so we're moving my stuff. And there's this crazy man on the radio talking about women and impulse homicide time because it's so hot. And I said, as we're driving across, I'm like, first of all, who listens to AM radio? And second of all, who is this jackleg? Well, he became a very good friend, and I love Terry Miners. As I unpacked my boxes, he helped me learn about the community and about the people who were here and the wonderful things that were happening, and so did the Leo, which I would read week after week. And eventually, even though my husband wanted a stay-at-home wife and he wanted kids, I asked him, did you lose your mind when we crossed that river? Remember the ambition? Remember the drive, the things that I've wanted to do? That's still in me. I don't want to just be Mrs. So-and-so. And so I started writing for Velocity, which was then the young adult publication that the Courier Journal published. I was one of the 3 initial writers. And next slide. One of the things that I did was promise myself to say yes. It got me in a lot of trouble sometimes. Because you say yes, will you MC this event? Yes. Will you cover this event? Will you go undercover as a go-go dancer? Yeah. Ooh. Well, I'm gonna have to call my mom. I'm like, actually, I did do that, by the way, and it was not like not the adult bars like that. It was like a literal go-go dancer at it was a bar beneath Jillian's, and I did that and actually learned some incredible stories, something I will never do again, and my daughter will not need to see that. But I said yes to so many different opportunities and experiences, and sometimes that meant that I was working all hours, and I was losing out on that personal life, but that was success for me. Next slide. And then, eventually, I decided that I would apply for the position of the buzz columnist at the Courier Journal. Now, I have never been, despite what some people think of my public persona, I don't care about pop culture. I really, it's not something that interests me, but I knew if I could become a columnist, maybe this could lead to something else. Next slide. So what I did was apply for the job of the buzz columnist, and unbeknownst to me, I mean, there were applications from across the country with people who had far more experience than I did. I got the job. I remember driving home, and I started crying because I was so excited. And then I was crying because I realized they're gonna find me out. I have no idea what I'm doing. I just convinced them to hire me, and I have no clue. But then I also realized what I was feeling was some trepidation. I'm gonna have to write about Brad Pitt and Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera for a living? So empty. So empty. That wasn't gonna work for me. So I had what I call my dirty little secret, because at the Courier Journal it was frowned upon to have an outside job. but I needed something more fulfilling. And so I got a position at a school, Brown Mackie College, where the majority of my students, they were the last chance students. You had some who were succeeding in business, but for the most part, my students were formerly incarcerated. They were working fast food jobs and knew that this would be it. And some of them were homeless. So I was sitting there during one night. So I would teach 4 hours a night, three nights a week. And also I was working as a columnist and features writer at the Courier-Journal. And I was sitting there one day, and there was this little tiny student who had her 2 sons, 9 and 10 years old. And after class, I had to say to her, Shalonda, it's against school policy to have kids here. So I'm gonna have to, ask you not to bring them back. And she looked at me and stood up to me and she said, Miss Fenton, they have to come here because I am going to get my education and I live at Wayside and I can't leave them at the homeless shelter by themselves. I just drove home just dumbstruck. How am I going to help this woman? Well, I don't know about you, but I like to start at the top when it comes to calling people because they can only push you down. Sometimes it's harder. So I called the housing authority, Mr. Barry, and got his secretary, and I told her who I was, and she patched me through. And when Mr. Barry got on the line, he started laughing. Not exactly the way I thought this conversation would start. You hear my name, and you start laughing, and he said, I read you every morning. That silly fluff column all of a sudden made an instant connection with Mr. Barry, and Shalonda and her boys within weeks were moved into housing, and she was able to stay at school and get her degree. But it broke my heart that whomever had been there, I dropped them. That was my responsibility. They got dropped. And then the next ones, there was something like more than 16,000 people on the list for housing. It was then and there that I vowed that anything that I do with a job, I was going to always make sure that I find a way to continue to give back. Now, a quick story about how I got into TV. So, do you remember Larry Burkhead and Anna Nicole Smith? And Larry Burkhead lives in Louisville, and by the way, does so many amazing things behind the scenes, including funding like Extol's Thanksgiving dinner for the homeless last year. We had somebody drop through, and Larry went to Kroger and bought all the turkey and refused to have, don't tell anybody I did this. He does things like that all the time, by the way, and he's a great dad. But anyhow, I've never been on TV before. I'm a columnist. I'm working nights as the teacher. And all of a sudden, Greta Van Sustern's producer called me. It was during Derby week, and she wanted to know, could you come on TV and talk about Anna Nicole Smith and Larry Burkhead? What? What world am I living in? But say yes. That was my motto, say yes. So I said yes, even though I walked through the day. I almost threw up 100 times. I think that day I was just overloaded. But that night, I went on TV, and even though I had no idea what I was doing with my hair or anything like that was going on there, I look back at it and I rocked it. I knew what I was talking about. I had the information. I was comfortable, and it was fun. I looked at it as I had information people wanted. And so that 5-minute and 42-second interview, it was amazing. The general manager of Wave 3 had seen that just very short clip and liked what I was doing and said, could you maybe do what you do in the Courier-Journal on TV as well? And all of a sudden, it was just saying yes had led to so much more. I was redefining what success meant. Now, I was also redefining what success meant because to me, working for the Courier-Journal, now working 3 days a week at Wave 3 and holding down a job at Brown Mackie College meant other things had to go. My dogs were my immediate priority, but I missed out. I missed out on dating. I didn't make friends. I had acquaintances. And I missed out on my family. I'm ashamed to say that when my family would come to town, we were on a timeline because my job was my priority. Work is important. I love what I do. But that is not, and you've heard it a million times, that is not how I want to be defined if today was my last day. After the Courier-Journal packed up a columnist who had been working there longer than I had been alive with his belongings in a garbage bag and escorted him out just because they eliminated his position. I knew I no longer wanted to work for the Courier-Journal. That wasn't a place, it wasn't a happy place. In fact, I saw an editor of mine after I made the decision to leave who left a note that I still have on a little business card on my car, and he said, "Not getting yelled at looks good at you." Because while I had some tremendous bosses over there and tremendous colleagues, it was a tough place to work. And I think at least one person in this room, Josh Suter, knows what that was like. My shoulders were up to here and I didn't even know it. Nothing was ever good enough. But so I decided I was going to leave and I was going to go to work for the Voice-Tribune and that college, and took that leap of faith and continued working for Wave 3. And then ultimately, next slide, I got a job working for WHS 11 as well. So I'm on weekdays, Monday through Friday. It's hosted by Terry Miners and Rachel Platt, two of the most incredible people and most important people in my life. And worked at the Voice-Tribune ultimately as the editor, and then doing this on the other side. And so that worked for a while until the day I walked in and my position had been eliminated. I have an email from my then boss because a month earlier things just weren't right. Something was just not right. And I just said, if I'm not wanted here, would you please just let me know so I can at least look for another job? And she responded, "You have a job here for as long as you want one." 1 month later, my position had been eliminated. I had these 2 bottles of pills that when I had first tried to talk to somebody, a professional, help me figure this out, they gave me pills. And then I never took them. They gave me Ambien and antidepressants. And I said, I want you to help me find someone to talk to. I don't want you to medicate me. If that's what I need, we'll figure that out, but at least talk to me. I had those pills, and every night I would look at Zeke. Zeke was one of the 3 dogs I had then. He had been left on the side of the road for days, and it wasn't until a child alerted her mother that they rescued him, and ultimately Zeke became mine. He was paralyzed from the waist down, magnificent, magical dog. I mean, he was. He rolled me down the aisle. But I would look at Zeke, and I mean this with everything in me, the only reason I did not take my own life is because I would look at him and I would say, but if I leave, who's going to take care of you? And no one knew how far down in the depression and how desolate I felt. Not my own colleagues at WHS 11, not my family, but that was Zeke. And he saved me every night. I'll be brief on this. I know my time is limited. Eventually, because that position had been eliminated at the Voice-Tribune and I was trying to figure out what to do and was freelancing, suddenly my social calendar also, it opened up. And once I finally figured out either you're gonna die or you can figure out how to turn tragedy into triumph, get up, get out. And I did. I met my husband on TV at his paint store. On a Monday, we're watching paint dry. I'm usually very positive about the things that we do on Great Day Live, but in this instance, it was really cool. It was in a historic building in New Albany. I made him tell the story about how it used to be a bar downstairs, and you could still see where the stairway led up to the brothel upstairs, and he was a good sport and told the story. And then he asked me out. Well, I still wasn't quite sure about this whole dating thing. So the first date, he said, I want to take you to dinner. And I'm like, how about brunch? Because 45 minutes and we'll be gone. So 5 hours later, as we're sitting there at Garage Bar, I thought, okay, I'll try this. So I'm going to get rid of him because when I had started dating people, like with Zeke, and I'm just going to show you what this looks like, you had to express his bladder. So imagine me standing up with this big black dog who's got this little hiney holder, and you got to do this. That's hot. What making your dog pee, right? And by the way, it's not as gross and messy as it sounds. It's really very simple. It's just weird. It is weird. So I brought coffee and our dogs, and Jason met me at the dog park, and I thought, this is when I'm going to get rid of him. And so we're just talking. I'm like, oh, hang on just a second. And so I walk over, and Zeke's got his wheels on, and I start making him pee. And you know what Jason said to me? You'll have to show me how you do that so I can help you. We've been together ever since. And I truly believe that Zeke brought us there. So on October 4th, 2 years ago, 2014, Zeke rolled me down the aisle. Next slide. Jason and I were married. And on December 17th, Zeke was my shadow, and he ate breakfast, and then he just died. He just died. I almost couldn't get out of bed for a week, but it was the most beautiful way you would want someone you love to die. It was quick, it was quiet, and he knew I was okay. Next slide. So now here we are, I'm juggling things. So what does success mean to me? We started Extol magazine at a time when everybody's telling you that print is dead. They're wrong. Print is dead in a lot of ways, but not niche publishing, and we're proof, we're growing. In fact, we're business partners, so we're married, we give birth to a magazine, give birth to a child, and now we're growing as a company. And I got a little upset with him this week because he did so well with sales that he was creating more issues for me as the editor. Because we really wear our editor and business hats. But for the most part, we have a really amazing work life. Like Wendy had said, Extol is available in more than 550 locations and growing. We're over into Louisville. We will stay, though. We will embrace Southern Indiana because that is our purpose. But now, in addition to saying yes, I don't hesitate to say no. Because my family, next slide, that's what's most important. Next slide. That's what's most important to me. That right there. I redefine what success means, and often. This week, it meant dropping my daughter off at daycare for the first time so I can fulfill my duties as Extol's editor of a machine that is just completely growing. And that was success. I did it. I only cried once. And I did it. And she's as happy as can be because she's going to know that while her career, Mama's career, is not more important than her, she's going to know her mother has dreams and she has goals, and I will always have them. I got pregnant at 40, gave birth at 41, and this time next year when I'm 42, I'll compete in what will be my 5th bodybuilding competition, and she's gonna be watching me do that. Redefine success, and often. You can turn tragedies big and small into triumph, but above all, make people feel like they matter, and that includes yourself.